is an image that is relevant from a event last week. Anybody know what this is? This is the mythological character Narsimha. And how would you describe Narsimha? Half man, half lion. Lion does not fully describe him. Man does not fully describe him. Nara, Simha, together. Right? So it takes two analogies to describe this creature. Anybody knows what this is? Which one? Yes, fighter plane, but which one? This is the Harrier. The Harrier takes off like a helicopter and then flies like a jet. So again, two analogies. This one part of it is described by a helicopter action, another part is described by a jet action. So when we think about ONDC, and this has been my experience in talking about ONDC over several months to several audiences, that to truly understand it, it doesn't take, because it's the first of its kind anywhere in the world, there is no one analogy that perfectly describes it, but there are several individual analogies that will describe some aspect of it, and when you understand them collectively, that's when the full picture of ONDC will fall into place. The other thing is that because we've been used to e-commerce in a certain way, we don't realize it, but it's become ingrained in us as that is the only way e-commerce takes place. And I think some threads of that were even in the panel that we heard earlier as to how those brands were solving it given the constraints that existed. Because it's so ingrained in us, and because of the factors that ONDC is bringing in are present in other parts of our life, but not in e-commerce, it will take some unearning. And your best opportunity to understand ONDC is think about your own businesses, think about your own context. If you're a manufacturer, if you're a retailer, if you're an advertising company, if you're a technology company, think of it from your perspective. And think of it like building blocks or like a Play-Doh that you have to apply to your arena, your domain. And only when you apply that imagination, ask questions and clarify is when the clarity will come. All of it can't be answered today in this session, so we do have detailed sessions in the room next door, and we hope to see a lot of you there and address that. But let me kind of get going with at least a few thoughts as to where the revolution is coming from and what is fundamentally changing. So today, if you look at why does anybody want to do e-commerce? E-commerce is being done to achieve scale. A seller wants to sell to millions of buyers. Buyers want thousands of assortment, lots of choice, and eventually select the best or the cheapest or whichever way they want to filter and select. Now that scale opportunity, if you go category by category, comes with very few options. So if I'm a restaurant owner, I probably have only a couple of platforms on which I can expect to really find food orderers at scale. If I'm a taxi owner, probably a couple of platforms. If I manufacture something for the home, 2, maybe 3 at best. So regardless of which category I am in, my opportunities for scale are actually very limited. Because they are very limited, those are my only options. Therefore, when I join them, I have to operate with the terms and conditions that are present there. So as a seller, I can sell the right product in right time to the right customer, perfect quality, perfect packaging. The customer changes their mind, sends it back. I have to bear the cost of it coming back to me. And if it's a replacement, not a return, then there's another leg that I have to bear. Right? Or the time I have to wait for the money to come. So when I have a physical store, a customer walks in, I get the money right away. But when I'm transacting on e-commerce, there may be 1 week, 10 days by the time I get my money. So there are other terms and conditions that may be okay for large players who may be part of e-commerce today, but make it very difficult for small players, retailers to really become part of the e-commerce system. And the alternatives to these large-scale marketplace structure of e-commerce is, yeah, you can create your own shopfront, you can create your own website. So you'll solve some of this problem, but then your website does not have traffic. So now you're having to spend money to draw in traffic, and not once, but again and again, because you're a going business. You don't want just one purchase, you need an ongoing business. And building your own e-commerce value chain is beyond the capability of most organizations. And all you have to do is look at the struggles of the large players and know that even for them, it's not a cakewalk. So how does this get solved? Now, these two principles by themselves are very simple. We know them in many other walks of our life. We just don't know them in e-commerce. And yet their application to e-commerce actually unravels so many things that this will take a little bit of time and effort to wrap your hands around. So let me first explain the principles. Unbundling. We are used to e-commerce being done by one entity end-to-end. And we've sort of told ourselves that that's the only way it works. Only when a single organization does everything will e-commerce work. But actually, in many walks of our life, that's not true. Many of you must be flyers, right? And so when we fly, what happens? You go to a building where the security is one organization, the management of that airport is another organization, and the airline is a third organization. We seamlessly go from a taxi, which is a fourth organization, all the way through in our journey without really thinking that we have gone through an unbundled journey of 4 partners. And that happens. The entire BPO industry, of which India is a huge part, why does it exist? because companies have decided that certain business operations can simply be given out to somebody else, no longer need to be done within. And not only is everything fine, everything is actually better, because these organizations are specialists and masters in those services. They do them better, they also do them cheaper. So unbundling, we know from many walks of our life. We've just never seen it in e-commerce. And then is interoperability. When you unbundle something, the parts need to work with each other. And interoperability also we are familiar with, right? So if you think about payments, payments actually have been interoperable even before digital. You could write a check of one bank and deposit in another bank, and the money would appear in the other bank account. You didn't need to have a bank account in the other bank to be able to give money into that account. But e-commerce doesn't work that way. A buyer and a seller have to be in the same platform, in the same application. If they're not both there together, you cannot do a transaction. And if you have to find a seller who's not there, you'll have to go to a different application and see if that person is present there, or go to a third one. So e-commerce is not interoperable, and it is all one organization. So when we think about daily activities like email, how does email take place? Similarly, my email client may be different from your email client, but there is a protocol. The email address must be something at something dot something. And because of that protocol, the communication between the two parts takes place. So what ONDC has done is built a commerce protocol. At its heart, ONDC is a protocol, if you really were to distill down to what it is. That protocol allows different entities to interact with each other, much like two email clients can interact with each other, much like two payment applications can interact with each other. Any large-scale structure which has two humans, each using a digital interface, has a protocol in between. If you think about the internet itself, similarly, right? At one end, you have people like us, consumers of content, also many of us who are creators of content. So human creator, human consumer. One uses a browser, one uses a web publishing platform, and in between is the HTTP protocol. So all scale digital human structures work in that format. And so what ONDC has built is that protocol in the middle. Now, what does it do? We understand e-commerce has many components. So any platform, largely, if you were to simplify it, has three kinds of activities in it. One set of activities are buyer-facing, where a buyer is searching for a product, adding to cart, making payment. Another set of activities are seller activities, where the seller is uploading catalog, updating their inventory, managing orders. And where there's a physical good being shipped or bought, then somebody is picking up the product from the shipper's location or the seller's location, delivering it to the buyer. If you go to another platform in the same category, you'll see similar activities. Now, these activities inside the platform are stitched together with their own proprietary protocol. And because these protocols are proprietary, these platforms don't talk to each other. So they're like completely parallel universes. And you have to literally go from one universe to the other in order to do anything. Now, what happens if you change those two factors, right? The unbundling and the interoperability. So now think of these activities being done by different entities, not by one entity, different entities. They're still connected with a protocol, but it's a public interoperable protocol. So you still get the same solution. Exactly the same solution you got earlier, with those two important differences. You have different entities doing different activities, and the protocol is common, open, available to everyone. Now, this is not an academic rearrangement, right, where you might think that, okay, so what does it really do if it's getting me the same solution? It is allowing now a buyer on any buyer platform to buy from a seller on any seller platform, and either party can order delivery from any logistics platform. That is not possible today. So even on the biggest platforms today, let's say I'm one of those loyalty program customers, and if I've ordered something that's going to arrive in 7 days, I need it urgently, let's say I want it day after tomorrow, I'm willing to pay air freight for it to come. There is no method to do it. Whatever will come on the basis of whatever has been erected. There is no flexibility in that. But now there is an option where I can figure out as a buyer or as a seller which combination I want to come into play, and I can create a solution on the fly. This does more than just simply create different models. It now allows participation from organizations that have a strength in one part to pool that strength with other parties that provide other parts. Let's talk about the buyer side. There are many organizations that have a pool of people, not for e-commerce necessarily, for something else. Banks have customers. Media companies have readers and viewers. Social media companies have participants. Telecom companies have users. So all these people have users for the services that they sell today. All of these organizations can now bring that universe and connect them to the network as buyers. Today, that's actually true. This is not theory. So we have a bank, which is a buyer application. We have two payment companies that are a payment application. We have a telecom company close to getting ready. And so all of them, as they pool in their buyers, you have one component of the network. Similarly, you have other organizations pooling in sellers. You have accounting software companies, POS companies. They have dealings with sellers. And as a POS company, you already know their catalog, you already know their inventory. Moment you connect them with the network, that shop becomes visible to the network. So now you can have a buyer on a telecom application shopping from a product on an accounting software company's seller. And it's getting stitched together on the fly by the network. And similarly, you have logistics providers. So what you get is a network that is pooled in, crowdsourced in a way, from across the length and breadth of the country, and one day even beyond the borders of the country, pooling in buyers, pooling in sellers, pooling in logistics providers. And this was a theoretical model a year ago. This is the reality today. Okay, so this is no longer theory. We have 6 buyer applications that are live. One is still in closed user group. Collectively, they have a user base of more than 50 million. We have a payment application that will come live soon, a telecom player that will come live soon. The buyer pool on the network will be more than 200 million in a couple of months' time. That's not small. That's probably larger than most e-commerce marketplaces, if not all. Similarly, we have 21 applications that have contributed sellers. Now, these are not just aggregators and telecom companies. You will see a name there, UShop. And I was marking the comments about D2C in the previous conversation. So Unilever's UShop is live as a D2C player. ITC's ITC Store is live as a player. Nivea, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Dabur, all these companies are going to bring their stores. So you have retailers who are present, you have aggregators who are present, you have D2C brands that are present, and now you have a network where any buyer on any application can shop from here. Now the challenge for D2C brands, and we'll come to that, are many. And a network situation like this solves that. There are not just these companies, there are many more in conversation, in fact, more than 300 organizations. And so imagine the common effect where sellers, buyers, logistics providers are being pulled in by a whole bunch of organizations to create one single large network. So what does it mean for an individual entity? Now you don't have to do all the parts. Contribute your business, just plug into the network, have other entities provide the other parts, and your e-commerce solution gets complete. That's a powerful idea, because now you don't have to build all components, just focus on your effort, like the BPO service provider. Right? So if you're a specialist in call centers, then just provide call center. You don't have to do the entire business. And there'll be enough people who will want call centers that will tap into your business. Let's look at some of the opportunities of Unthinkable. And in the end, remember, it's me and my team, a small bunch of people, our imagination, but when your collective imagination comes in, there'll be many more use cases possible. So by no means is this exhaustive. But let's talk about scale. Scale, we thought of in the current structure, only available if you become a participant in one of the 2 or 3 large marketplaces, depending on which category you're in. So whether you're selling medicine or you're doing taxi rides or a restaurant, only then you would get scale. But in a structure like this, scale is available to everyone. So we have more than 20,000 restaurants live today. And each of them, depending on the geography, of course, you don't order food from neighboring town, but once the restaurant pool is wide, once the buyer pools are enabled, then all of them can start achieving orders at scale. The opportunity for this is not just large players. Today, we heard in the previous conversation, somebody was talking about making a product for curly hair. Now, how does a manufacturer of curly hair product find their customers? Very hard to. But now they don't need to, because as long as it's known that there is a product for curly hair, anybody on any of these applications, there's somebody on Meesho, somebody on Paytm, somebody on Craftsvilla, any one of them searching for curly hair product, as long as they're connected to the network, will show up. So the challenges that brands were facing of finding buyers at scale now becomes available to everyone. That also automatically has a knock-on effect on scale-related behaviors. Because when only a couple of parties could offer scale, then there was a commercial situation that emerged out of that. But when scale is available to everyone, then it's a very different commercial situation that emerges. Right? So think about the internet, which I gave a reference to, and think about the browsers. How much do browsers charge you today? Or how much do browsers charge websites? You have millions of websites. So when you have an open network where there are easy substitutes, then the commercial considerations become very, very different. So scale is available to everyone at an affordable cost. I talked about D2C. Now, why do brands do D2C? They do it for many reasons. They do it because they want first-party information. We heard that also in the previous conversation. They do it because the cost of e-commerce on marketplaces is too high, and this becomes more efficient. They also do it because they can showcase their entire catalog, which any retailer, no matter how big, will showcase only the best-selling items. Now you can showcase your entire catalog in the way you want to do it. It's also why people have their own showrooms, while they may be present also in multi-brand outlets. That's why they do it. But what are the challenges they face? So challenge, first of all, is traffic. because consumers don't buy only from one company product. So if I'm, let's say, buying my monthly groceries, I'm buying my toothpaste from one company, my shampoo from another, my cooking oil from a third. And why would I go to 3 different websites and do it? And that's the challenge they face. So you have a problem of traffic. You also have a problem of delivery efficiency, because how much delivery efficiency can you get by having only one product go out vis-a-vis an entire Kirana pool? Now, all you have to do is connect your distribution points, because you're not solving for the entire basket. And a day when all brands are present as the D2C brands, the consumer basket can be full in a single shopping experience by just simply adding products from multiple companies to cart in a single cart, even though the eventual sellers are something different. So now D2C brands have an opportunity to address many of the questions they have. Now, what I've described doesn't solve the logistics cost problem, right? But I'm hoping that with time, as the need emerges, because of the open nature, somebody else will solve for it. So this is one illustration of what today is unthinkable for D2C brands to access scale will also be possible. Let's look at multi-domain. We today think of nothing, let's say if we're going on a holiday where we are booking our flight on one application, we're booking a hotel on a different application, our taxi to the airport is on a third application, and maybe if you're looking for services at the destination, we're probably doing a fourth different way. Right? And we think nothing of going into these multiple paths. But why should that be? And so once you have a single network where all sellers are connected, all buyers are connected, a buyer should be able to add all these things to cart in a single shopping experience. If I'm planning a birthday party, why should I order my cake and food from one and then look for a clown or a magician somewhere else? Why can't I find them both in a single activity and add them to cart? So the opportunity to now think from an occasion, think from an end-use standpoint, rather than think category by category. If I'm going on a holiday, I might even need medicine, and even for medicine now I have to go to a fourth platform that is specializing in OTC. Why could I not simply add it to the cart in the same fashion? So multi-domain opportunity, because you're pulling in sellers, also becomes an automatic thing. Let's talk about the value chain. So it's not just about retailers or brands selling to consumers. It's actually completely up and down that chain. So today we have farm producer organizations that are live on our network. I said 149 of them, and we've already done more than 100 transactions. We also have National Seed Corporation of India selling 26 of their seeds. So now a farmer can buy tomato seeds on the network, grow the tomato, sell that tomato to a pulp maker. The pulp maker can then sell it to a juice maker, and the juice maker can then sell it to a consumer. So any component of that chain, all you need is a buyer-seller catalog combination, and that combination will be valid. So you no longer need to go to, okay, when I'm selling to consumers, I do business on one platform. When I'm buying for my procurement reasons, I'm buying from a second one. And then when I'm buying other stuff like my A4 size paper for my copier and coffee for the office, I'm doing it to third place. No longer. In a single network, you'll now be able to go up and down no matter what you're selling and what you're buying in a single location. So not only this, but even consumer to consumer. If you're a maths tutor and you want to find students, if you're a home baker and you want to have people order from you, where would you go? Now, if you're on the network, potentially 50 million people can see your home bakery. 50 million people can see your maths tutorial catalog and in terms of your service fees. So the opportunity for any sort of a seller, any sort of a buyer to be able to combine is now available on a single protocol. Let's also look at costs. There are many aspects to costs. So let's first talk about the acquisition costs. Right? One of the realities that is almost taken as a given in the world of digital is digital consumer acquisition costs. And depending on the category and the context you're in, they can be several hundred to a few thousand rupees. But what this network is doing is simply taking people who have buyers and people who have sellers and connecting them. So now there is no acquisition cost. We have 8 weavers of Kanjivaram silk in Kanchipuram who have now become sellers on a network. We have a lady who runs her own homegrown skincare products, all the usual bad things free. Anubhuti is her name. She runs that. Her products are available on the network. We have people in farms outside Satara as part of the Mandeshi Foundation that has enabled 8 lakh women entrepreneurs to come live. So earthen toys made by them, pickles made by them, they're live on the network. Now, where would these people have found an ability to access market in an affordable way? Because anywhere they would list, they would have to part with a significant portion of what the consumer is willing to pay. What are they paying now? Actually nothing. Because the seller application has onboarded them, and whenever there is an order, as long as the buyer is willing to pay for delivery, they not only have to pay for nothing, they actually have to do nothing. Right? And so the opportunity to participate is much greater. So that's one cost that has gone away. Another cost which has not gone away but may be recast very, very differently is going to be marketing costs. And I know this community will be particularly interested because that's a question we get in every briefing, that in today's e-commerce, we have an ability to spend money and bump our product up. But you have to remember that the current structure is where the entire purchasing journey has been boxed into a couple of large players. They are now cornering the larger portion of the transactions. What happens when the transactions are spread far apart? They're not cornered by a couple of players. Then what happens to those marketing costs? And here, let me take you to a different analogy. Go back to the pre-digital era. In the pre-digital era, companies would have physical distribution. You would have stores in products in thousands of stores, maybe lakhs of stores. How did you spend in the shopping channel then? Actually, you didn't spend anything close to what we're doing today. So in those days, I remember at least in FMCG, the cost of marketing in the channel, like the money you would pay for displays, etc., was about 2 to 3% of revenue at best. And sometimes that would not even be for display, that would be also allocated to other activities. Today, companies are paying 20, 30, sometimes even 40% in order to get that sales channel. So now when you have multiple buyer applications and many ways of reaching the same buyer. So today on my phone, I have at least 6 applications that are either live on the network as buyer applications or soon to be. I, as a single customer, can shop exactly the same products through any one of them. And so here's another analogy for you. What happens when the seller universe is common, but you have multiple buyers? And we know that universe today. Airline tickets. It's the same supplier, it's the same airline. So whether I buy it from one travel agent or buy from one travel portal or another travel portal, it's the same airlines, the same flights. So the seller pool is common. Now, what behavior do I see there, which is very different from the marketplaces? First of all, how much is the price competition there? In fact, there are many times you will see right down to the rupee the exact same price, not only across those platforms, but even in the original airline website. Right? So you are doing it on the basis of service, you're doing it on the basis of rating, you're not doing on the basis of something else. So as we look at the opportunities that emerge, the cost of doing business in a lot of places will change. People will find optimization because now you're not spending to do everything. Just imagine if we told every airline that every airline has to have their own airport, their own security, their own runways. How easy will that be to be financially successful? Thank God we don't do that. So we have a common airport, airlines only play landing rights. Security is managed by somebody else, airports are managed by somebody else, the upkeep is managed by somebody else, and all of that is available as a common pool. So if you have a helicopter, you run a helicopter service. You have a 4-seater, you run a corporate service. You have Boeings and Airbuses, you run commercial service. That's what happens when you have a shared infrastructure. So costs are going to change across business, not just from a marketing standpoint, and practices will also change. So I thought this should paint a picture of some of the things that are possible, and I look forward to having a much deeper conversation with many of you in the afternoon sessions, and happy to take on your specific contexts and do that. We do have a few minutes left, so I left that for questions because I know there always are, and if there's a microphone, then if that can be made available to the folks raising their hands.
Shirish, thanks, Don. Let me start by congratulating you and your team for doing this phenomenal job. I joined 5 minutes late, so do let me know if you did cover that. Historically, unmanaged marketplaces, eBay, were trying to solve, to some extent, something like this, right? The biggest commitment or biggest sort of promise managed marketplaces was about the customer experience, right?
Yeah.
And from delivery to stockouts and so on and so forth. And I'm sure you've looked at it. A lot of people did try this hyper-local sort of management, but the experience was so poor, both from a delivery and from a stock perspective, it just didn't work. So I just want to get a perspective of how do you think in the entire ONDC protocol, the customer experience aspect will get managed?
Sure. So first of all, if you think about any unbundled chain, typically the customer's relationship is only with the first interface that they have, right? So let's say I was redoing this hall as a hotel manager. I had an architect. The architect may be bringing people who are doing carpets and electricals and carpentry, etc. I will not deal with them. I will deal with the architect, right? So there is a set of services behind. Or if it was a wedding planner, I won't talk to the caterer or the florist directly. I will talk to the wedding planner. So whenever there is a sequential interaction, you deal with your entity. If I send you money and you don't receive it, I won't talk to your bank. I will talk to my bank because that's where I've initiated the transaction. So in ONDC, the buyer will have that expectation out of the buyer application, and the buyer applications are fully aware. And so part of the reason why buyer applications are treading step by step, and now that, because software you can turn on with the flick of a switch, but we are still not, although the switch has been flicked on, we are not expanding nationally in a go for exactly that reason. So they want to make sure first the experience itself. So how does somebody shop for food? How does somebody shop for clothes? How does somebody shop for a household item? If I wanted a remote, I only need to describe the remote. But if I'm buying a shirt, I need to say I'm a male size XL, because that isn't, if I'm booking a hotel room, I need to give a check-in and check-out date. So buyer applications are mindful. They're building the interfaces that are appropriate for that category. They're also partnering with sellers from that category for insights. And so that's the learning that will shape, because none of them have been in e-commerce. So this is learning for them. So that's why we're proceeding step by step. We're also monitoring the operations very, very closely. We're looking at the fill rates. We're looking at cancellations, why the cancellation are taking place. And so reason we are moving, I shouldn't say slowly, but certainly cautiously, is for ensuring that that is settled so that then we can move it at scale.
Hi, sir. Thank you for the presentation. You've put out good reasons for the buyer side and the seller side. Would you be also be able to make some points why would the end consumer want to adapt this in a big way?
Yeah.
And along with that also, recently there have been some reports while we say that the India's internet audience is 500 million users, 600 million users, but really the worthy people who are actually spending, I think that number comes around 40 to 50 million users, where they say that all D2C brands are essentially fighting only for that base. I also attended your session yesterday where they said I think around 6% of the India is shopping. So what's the plan? Like, why would the rest of us want to adapt this when they're still not even using the current infrastructure which is there?
Sure. So many reasons, right? And we will evolve the story one by one. It's almost going back 30 years in time when internet first came to say who will use the internet. And at that time, partly given data speeds, partly given access to computers or laptops, very few people were using it, and look where it is today. And what we know internet is capable of today, none of that was known at that time, right? We just knew it as some information. We didn't even have graphics, let alone videos. But look at where we are today. So there is email, there is commerce, there is social media, right? There's so much that is taken. Entertainment is flowing through it. Now we have televisions that are using internet, forget laptops and mobile phones. So things evolve over time. And the belief is that, first of all, there is a gap. So yes, the number is right. Most estimates, even today, put e-commerce penetration as 6 to 7%. Most of that is large urban centers. Right? So let's separate your answer into two parts. What happens to these 6, 7% who are already here, and what happens to the remaining 93, 94? The remaining 93, 94 don't have access. So for them, and in fact, we have many of these sellers coming on board for the first time. It's a first experience for them. What they are now able to do is, because they can send a direct link to their own store, their existing customers can start shopping online even today. And so this situation will be built like the internet was, use case by use case. There's no single magic bullet that's going to blow the whole thing wide open. It happened in the case of payments, because payment is only one product, right? And it's not one SKU. It's only a number after that. Right? It's a 5 rupees or 5,000 rupees or 5 lakh rupees, and it's digital. There's no physical. So discontinuous events like the demonetization or COVID could flip that dramatically. E-commerce will not happen that way. E-commerce will be built step by step, but it will get built because there are many use cases. For example, the multi-domain. Why should you, while planning a holiday or planning a party, have to go to 3 or 4 different applications? Why is that a great idea? And if you had all those available, why would you not do it? Also, because of the nature of the scale, we don't have access to our own choice, right? So I might want, let's say, the suits tailored by the person neighbor, because I know that neighborhood, I know that person. Right? Now you might throw me somebody who's a 5-rated tailor in the neighboring city. Maybe 5-rated, but I want it from, and I can't find my neighborhood tailor. I can't find my neighborhood grocer. I can't find all my neighborhood restaurants. But when you're crowdsourcing this and I have the ability to find stores that I already know, then I don't even need the network rating. In fact, even if the network rating is poor, but if I know the store, I will still buy from them. So being able to migrate existing trusted relationships is now an opportunity for several small sellers, which on the large marketplace, they will get lost. Even if they were to participate, they fear the risk of disintermediation, which is lots of sellers of one kind. The marketplace with the data is able to build their own supply chain, and eventually they go away completely. So there are many use cases. Multi-domain is one. Access to e-commerce itself is another. And finding efficient solutions. Right? So we credit these large organizations with a lot of technical solutions that they've done, and they have done that, and a lot of credit for that. But they've not solved everything. Today, a 4 rupee item reaches my home accurately every single day. And my neighbor gets a different one, my newspaper. Right? And I've not known any newspaper delivery system to be lining up outside PE organizations to say, hey, we need funds, we're losing money. They're profitable, a 4 rupee item. None of these can deliver that. So the idea is that if you are able to pull in capabilities across the length and breadth, you will be able to create solutions that are not possible today. Right? You will be able to think of some people in the other row will be able to think of some people outside this hall will be able to think of some. And like the internet, over a period of time, different people will hit upon different ideas. We've created the protocol. And the protocol allows your ideas and your situation to be solved for.
Shirish,
Yeah.
hi.
Hi.
I mean, excellent. This is just the need of the hour. Thank you for democratizing e-commerce, if I can use that word. But I have just two questions. One is, see, a lot of the our necessity to interact with these large marketplaces comes from some assurance of service, etc. So when you're putting all of them together, do you have a protocol to kind of keep evaluating suppliers on a constant basis? Which also comes from the fact that how do you onboard a supplier with a standard service agreement of sorts?
Right.
And second question is obviously how is ONDC managing this? Where are where's your model coming out of? Your revenue model in terms of
you worried about my salary? All right.
because you mentioned no, because you clearly mentioned that there is no cost,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Anyone who gets onto the it's absolutely democratizing the whole. I can't call it marketplace anymore, but this platform. But therefore, where is ONDC's model
Sure.
work, and how does that work? So
Okay.
my first question is more pertinent because as a consumer, I would definitely like to know that are you continuously evaluating suppliers so that this consistently remains a platform that I want to come to again and again?
Sure. So where we are today and where we're going, and then more will get added. In fact, we put out our steps to build trust in the network as a public paper for consultation. We got some useful feedback, and so we'll continue to build on that. The good news is ONDC is starting more than 10 years after e-commerce. So we don't have to solve for everything. Right? So somebody figured out that, okay, I want to make sure a high-value item is delivered accurately, I will send an OTP. I don't have to, or ONDC doesn't have to invent the OTP system. Or somebody figured that consumers can be naughty and they can be buying one thing and returning something else. So I will not accept a refund request till my delivery person picks it up, validates that it is correct, and only then I will do it. We'll simply adopt that practice. So first is that we are adopting practices that have already been solved for. Now we only have to focus on what nobody has solved for, including the existing solutions. The responsibility of validating the sellers is with the seller applications. Seller applications are registered with us, and it's part of their network participant agreement. And they are also in this for the long haul. They will survive as a business if the sellers who have onboarded with them continue to do business. And if they keep losing people, then their reputation also get hit. We are building a reputation ledger. It's not ready today, but it's in process, where both the seller application and the sellers will also have a reputation. Partly driven by the ratings, which can be judgmental, and only 1 or 2% of shoppers actually do it, and usually when they're annoyed rather than when they're happy. But there are many other things which are objective, right? So what percentage of time was the order fulfilled accurately? What percentage of time was there no complaint? What percentage of time when there was a complaint it got resolved? These are objective network information. And so to make these available for you to judge. But even before that, you have the opportunity, including today, literally today, you can step out of this hall and put in your PIN code in any of these buyer applications and look at your own neighborhood, and some of those stores you will know. So you do not need the intermediation of a mechanism to trust somebody you didn't know. You can start with people you know. Right? So as mentioned, Unilever is live. In another 10 odd days, Boat will be live. Now, if you trust those brands, buy from them. If not, you wait for somebody who comes on board. Right? So you can take your steps along the way. There is no compulsion. Right? And so the idea is that we build on best practices that already exist. We build in mechanisms. We're also building in, so there is already an issue grievance management which is automated, which all participants have to incorporate, which they're in the process of doing. On top of that, we'll build an online dispute resolution mechanism, where the digital transaction history gets ported to a digital arbitrator, and who can pronounce, and this is a binding based on the agreement that they've signed with us. So these mechanisms will help build and strengthen trust. In the meantime, you only buy from who you choose to trust.